Hey everybody, it's Barb, and today I'm going to be answering your common beginner colored pencil questions. Just a quick note before we get started, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything. First up is, what is the difference between oil and wax-based colored pencils? Let's start by talking about some of the common points about each type. Wax-based colored pencils tend to have softer leads, tend to be easier to blend, and for that reason they're a really big favorite of a lot of beginner artists. They also have higher cases of wax bloom or hazing, and the points tend to break easier because of the softer leads. Prismacolor is one of the most popular wax-based brands, and I'm just going to do a demonstration here to show you what the application is like. It's very smooth and very creamy. I'm also using a Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper, which is a really great choice if you're a beginner. It's really affordable and a great place to start until you decide which techniques work for you. Oil-based color pencils tend to have harder leads and blend really well with odorless mineral spirits. They have less cases of wax bloom or hazing and tend to hold a point longer due to their harder leads. Two popular brands of color pencils that are marketed as oil-based are Derwent Lightfast and Faber-Castell Polychromos. The Derwent Lightfast, in my opinion, is a bit of a combination between Prismacolor and Polychromos, and the Polychromos one is definitely a harder feeling lead, but still blends really well. I'm going to demonstrate for you now how these color pencils blend with themselves. The bombshell in all of this is that the oil versus wax debate is actually kind of inaccurate. The Colored Pencil Society of America recently wrote an article on this topic, and they consulted a few experts for it. What they found was that it's actually more about the process of the type of wax blends that each company is using, and the term wax or oil is sort of being used more as a marketing positioning statement as opposed to there being any liquid oil actually involved in the manufacturing process. They go on to say that the term should actually be more accurately post-waxed or pre-waxed. I won't go into too many more technicalities about this in this video, but just know that what this really comes down to is which feel and results you really like best. Next up, which is better, hot or cold pressed paper? Once again, let's first look at the characteristics of each. In cold pressed paper, it is more textured to your surface, there's more work required to cover the white of the paper, and the texture is still visible even after complete coverage. Hot press, which tends to be the more popular of the two, has a smooth fine-grained surface, requires less work to cover the white of the paper, and the texture is not visible after complete coverage with colored pencil. If you're buying this in the store in a pad, they are usually labeled quite clearly whether they are cold or hot press. Also, there's a visual difference that is quite apparent, and if all else fails, you can usually tell by touch as well. In this demonstration, you can see a very clear difference between the two types of paper and the work that would be required to just get rid of all of the white of your paper. Now, some of you might be wondering, why would you use a watercolor paper for a dry media, but some colored pencils are also water soluble. In this demonstration, I'm going to use a watercolor pencil and just show you the difference when water is applied. Now, depending on what the style you're going for is, you might do heavier applications, in which case the cold press paper might handle that a little bit better. It tends to be a little bit better for larger or heavier applications, and the hot press paper, it dries quicker, but you may not be able to do quite as many layers. And this is just the application now with dry colored pencil over top, and as you can see, the hot press still performs quite well, whereas the cold press, it still is showing a lot of texture, and you're not going to get that really smooth look that you will with a hot press or just a smoother paper in general. These are two examples of illustrations that I did on each type of paper. Not all cold press paper is super textured. As you can see though, you still do see texture more so than you do on the hot press. I would recommend, if you are going to use cold press though, to use wet and dry applications for it. You'll find you'll have an easier time filling in the tooth of the paper that way. Next up, should I spray fix my artwork? There are advocates for and against this, so let's look at the advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages are that it can provide UV protection, archival protection, and can reduce or alleviate wax bloom. Some of the disadvantages are that not all fixatives are created equal, meaning that you should really try it on a test before you put it on your final artwork. You might find that some perform a little better than others. Pastel artists especially tend to not use fixatives as it can either damage or dull the finish on their pieces. And you also want to be able to use these in a well-ventilated area, which isn't always available for everyone. To give you an example, this is a mixed media piece I did with pan pastel and colored pencil. When I went to use a spray fixative on it, the nozzle wasn't quite clear and I got this unintentional speckling on it. So again, it doesn't look terrible, but if this isn't something that you want, you obviously don't want to be using these fixatives on your pieces. Moving on to our next question, what is the best size to work in for a beginner? The best thing to remember when you're starting out with a medium that tends to be really slow like colored pencil is to do it at a size that you will complete. Larger sizes can allow for more detail, but it can also be really overwhelming. I would recommend working at a smaller size but with larger subject matter. That way you can still get a lot of detail in, but you're working at a size that is comfortable for you to complete. Our last question is, how do I fix mistakes? You can fix mistakes in a couple of quick ways. One is obviously by erasing. You can use this battery operated eraser by Derwent in this example. Or you can use a kneaded eraser if you're just trying to get color transfer away from areas you want to keep white. It's always a terrifying moment when you've made a mistake, especially if you're almost done, but this battery operated eraser works quite well. It won't get you back completely to white, but it'll at least get you to a point where you can hopefully correct your mistake relatively easily. Depending on what your mistake is, another solution you could try is using a workable fixative. This adds another layer, essentially, of texture to the top of your existing colored pencil so that you can draw over top of it. Although this works relatively well, you may need a few different applications and really let it dry before you move on. My last tip, and probably the most unconventional, is to try to find a way to make it look intentional. Sometimes there are ways where you can get creative and actually get some happy accidents out of mistakes. In some cases that's not always possible, but it's a good creative exercise to see if you can fix it that way, especially if the other two methods don't work for you. If you have a beginner question I didn't answer today, leave it for me in the comments below, or just leave me a comment letting me know if this video helped you. Thanks so much for watching. You can find me at all my social channels at BarbSodiArt. If you like this video and want to see more of them, don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.